this did is first taking away, kind of elevating localization from just words and translation and showing that it's all about experience, about everyday lives, like different cultures, different behavior, different needs are so much more than just the words we translate, and how we need to think beyond the translation and that experience.
Välkommen.
Bem-vindo.
Witamy.
欢迎.
Welcome to the Blend Podcast. Fresh, fun, informative. This is your backstage pass for exclusive language industry news and views, interviews with leaders, translators, and pros, and insights on the intersection of words, business, and culture.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for the podcast. So my guest today is, try to say the name without messing up, Hristina Racheva. I'm sorry. You'll say it the right way. I'll just say it like Israeli Hristina. And Hristina is the head of localization at Skyscanner and also localization consultant and career mentor. And she has years of experience in this business, and also very committed to making localization more accessible, I think, to both experts in this field and also clients as well. Very happy to have you here with me today. So let's just start with a short, introduction of you, also involving pronouncing your name the right way.
Your name is easier to pronounce.
Yes. Yeah.
So well done on trying, nevertheless. It's
Thank you.
Hristina. It's a very soft H and then a hard R, which makes it harder to real sounds. I'm from Bulgaria. I usually say this is where the name is from, and this is where I'm from.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. I used to do a lot of talks a while ago, and it's been a while since I haven't. So it's really nice to be back. And you guys at Blend are always so nice to work with. I had so many different opportunities to chat with so many of your team. So I'm super excited. Thank you.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. Do you want to speak a little bit before we kind of dive in about your background in the industry? You have a very interesting background in this industry. Yeah. So, what kind of led you to your current position at Skyscanner?
I guess I have an interesting background, but then also a lot of us in the industry. So I think I'm a bit more special outside of the localization industry when I talk about my background. People are impressed, and then in our industry, everyone is just so unique. So I'm originally from Bulgaria, from a very small town, from a normal family. For some reason, I was always interested in reading, writing, and all those stories from around the world. And I studied languages, and I ended up for my undergraduate studying Iranian studies. So Iran, the language, history, culture, also the Middle East. And I like to think of this was one of the most defining periods of my life, because again, coming from a small country like Bulgaria so many years ago, we were not as open. It was like just opened my mind to different worlds out there, to different cultures. Of course, Iran cannot be any more different than Bulgarians.
I think for most of the countries of the world, it's very unique.
So it was really fascinating. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do afterwards, and kind of almost like that was a trait that has been throughout my life. I love languages, I loved cultures. I just didn't know what I wanted to do when I grow up. And people kept asking me, Iranian studies, what are you going to do with that? I don't know. I love it. I enjoy doing it. Just there was some sort of a secret hope and trust that something will come out of it. So I decided to do a degree then in translation and localization. It was a combined degree between Paris and London, which was amazing. I also had part of that internships in Brussels in the European Commission. So it was really, really interesting, kind of getting into the world of translation. One thing that I didn't know, though, as I signed up for this 2-year master degree, I found out that as translators, we translate into our native language. And for me, this was a shock. I was like, why did no one tell me this before signing up? As a Bulgarian native and Bulgarian speaker, again, it's a small country. Again, it wasn't a big market. So my kind of big career aspirations were the European institutions as a Bulgarian translator.
Yeah.
So I was lucky that I got 3 internships actually, 2 in Brussels and Central translator. And then I had my second revelation is that I didn't enjoy translating. I love languages.
That's a good revelation.
After I graduated. And it told me as an occupation, you're on your own in front of the screen. And the European institutions, it's pretty boring as well. The text is very scientific, economics, so it wasn't stimulating either. So there I was at the end of my degrees, thinking, what am I going to do with all those degrees, with those languages? I don't have a proper job because I think times are changing a bit now, and especially depends on the countries. But back then as well, it's just having degree languages wasn't a career, per se.
Yeah.
So I had a bit of a hard time. I did a bit of customer service, working with languages, because that was the things we could do. And then I came across a job for a localization project coordinator. And that time I was living in Dublin, and the role was at Google. And I actually didn't even know what localization coordinator was. Even though in my master's degree, we had one class in localization, and it had nothing to do, now looking back, nothing to do with the word of localization. So I got the job, I started, and I fell in love with the localization, project management and the localization space, because we still work with languages, but I get to do so many
things.
And I'm someone that's very active. I like diverse and dynamic environment. I love problem solving, which we do a lot all the time. And I love just interacting with all the different stakeholders. You learn about what they do within the organization, different disciplines. So I really, really loved it. As much as I loved it, I didn't like living in Dublin. It's no offense, I love my Irish friends.
No offense to anyone who listens.
It's really cold and dark.
I'm Israeli, I get you. I understand, yeah.
So I moved to Barcelona 7 years ago, and I got my job at Skyscanner, and that's kind of how I ended up in my current role. At the beginning, there was a team of 2 people. So it's been a very, very big journey for me, growing almost as a professional while I was here, also growing the team, growing the capabilities of our program. We'll talk about that later. But that's kind of how I go where I am today, and my journey.
Yeah, I like that the journeys are always, when I speak to people, because, for me, I always feel like my journey is so unique, and because I changed my careers, I studied something, and now I do something completely different, but then I start talking to people, and I see that almost all of us kind of like transitioning along the way. So I love hearing how people kind of end up. And now you work at Skyscanner, which is obviously a very big company, and kind of really big a website as well, and kind of interesting to hear a little bit about your day-to-day at Skyscanner, because again, Skyscanner, just because of being Skyscanner is obviously a website for searching flights and other vacation or traveling sessionals, but I think most of the people use it to search flights. If correct me if I'm wrong. That's what I use it for. So just by the nature of it, it's a global site because there's always be users from all around the world with very specific needs. So I can imagine that the localization, aspects are crucial for the success of the company. So if you could speak a little bit about that, about what's your main goals, how your day to day, how do you even start working on strategy, because it's such a big position I think in Skyscanner, the localization is more crucial than in other industries, if I think correctly.
Yeah, so that's a big space.
Yeah, it's very big. I know. We can narrow it down. Yeah. Start at the beginning. Exactly. I'm sorry.
No. But it's interesting. I found interesting when I joined in almost 7 years. We were actually languages.
Yeah.
And that was actually already the case years ago, I think. It was in the first few years that they started expanding into different markets, or rather languages, shall I say, because we know just because you're available in a certain language doesn't mean that it's done well or that it's
exactly.
But from that perspective, there were a lot of languages early on. But when I joined, we had technology, processes. We had one very simple tool, and everything was done in emails and spreadsheets, and already 35 languages.
Oh my God.
We also had 5 vendors for some reason. Someone in the past decided. I think it was a lot of this history.
In a legacy, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You add 5 languages and you have a random vendor. Then you add another 10. There was another vendor. And I think we see that a lot of people being single, or 1 or 2 people on the team. When you're such a small force, it's just hard to think about the future and to optimize. You basically just bear it head down and creating spreadsheets and sending emails.
Yeah, you need to get the job done. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the benefit in a way I had, and I realized looking back afterwards, is I was hired in a way because I come from obviously Google, where everything is highly optimized, automated, streamlined. And I had this idea when I was interviewed. Of course, when you're interviewed, you get to understand a bit where the company is in their journey. So I was thinking, there's an opportunity to have an impact, to improve things, having this sort of positive, optimistic view. And then you start, and then you realize, as we know, all of us, how hard it is to optimize as you're running at the same time.
Yeah.
So I think kind of early on, being kind of involved with some of our leads within bigger groups. So we organized the company and tribes and squads. So squads are those independent teams, and tribes are groups of teams. So to my tribe leadership, having access to some more senior people within the company. I was this person that was always complaining, which now I learned over the years that we don't always go to leadership and complain only. But this was part of my learnings throughout. I was, talking about the benefits of having tools, technology. So we grew the team a bit. Once we had that, we were able to optimize more process. So that's kind of been our journey. Growing little by little the team, focusing on optimizing the basics of the foundation. And that's how I talk also to my kind of key stakeholders in the senior leadership. When we talk about localization, we have all those layers. There's the foundation, where just getting the basics right, have tool in place, optimize as much as possible, remove all manual work, make it easy for us as a team and for our stakeholders. Have all that process. So that's the foundation. And once we have that in place, you can start thinking about actual experience, like images, design, product. You can start thinking about performance of the product or market. So
exactly.
Those are, once you have that,
You need the base, then good, because in a website again as Skyscanner, I think localization mistakes could be crucial, right? Because if I'm just to have I sell clothes and then I mistake something, it's not a big deal. But if I misunderstood the information from a flight, that could cause a lot of problems for my users. So I could imagine, and something that you just sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that for us, it's what makes our business model hard for localization and for other things is while we're a meta search, right? We offer you the ability to compare prices across thousands of providers.
Yeah.
But at some point, you are redirected to the provider, maybe to the airline, agency. And at that point, we have no control over the quality and the content that is there. So we've had actually real incidents based on the integration with partners. For example, a user would start on Skyscanner. I think it was related to maybe some of the Scandinavian currencies.
Okay.
I think they were krona was maybe the same in a few of the Scandinavian countries, I think. But it's different as well depending on the country where you're from. So someone might have been with dollar symbol for Australia and America. Anyway, there was an issue
with Canada.
Exactly.
It can be confusing.
So a user started on Skyscanner. If they were maybe based in Australia, they had the Australian dollar and the dollar symbol. But as they got redirected to the partner, that connection between our service and their, on the partner side, it changed to a different currency, like a dollar, but maybe it was American.
And then the price changed.
And the user didn't realize that. And for them, it's actually Skyscanner's issue. They started with us. So there is that added challenge. We also, when it comes to hotels, for example, again, we have thousands of partners that offer hotels, and there's so much content about hotel descriptions and rooms, but we don't own that. Again, that comes. So there is a lot. As a result of that, we've actually, through partnerships in the past, we've provided that service to some of our partners where our team, we did an introduction to them. What is localization? How do you do localization right? We carried out quality evaluation of their content. We gave them recommendations to improve. So we've actually done those mini consulting services to some of our partners externally that we can ensure that consistent experience.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense because, again, I can only imagine having something, misunderstood due to a translation in my flight information. That could be very bad for the user. And another thing that kind of came up to me while you were talking, and that kind of came up again with other interviews with localization, head of localization in other company, is how important it is to work closely with other stakeholders, such as design and product and all of that, from a very early stage of, a new product or a new feature or something like that. And do you feel the same? Because you did, mention it. And I think it's very interesting insight in localization. The localization managers need to be involved from early stages of development.
Definitely. And I think from a lot of those kind of perspectives at this stage of our journey, we're actually super proud of the team and of all of us. We're so advanced and coming from a place of just knowing how hard it is to get involved, to be recognized. So some of the work that we've done, I realized after years trying to get visibility and understanding, people actually enjoy doing fun things. So we've connected through the fun side. So at some point, I think it all started with one April's Fool Day. I created there was a quiz. We did a quiz with our tribe about how different countries celebrate April's Fool Day. Or it's different. It's all different. It's a different, even like I think in Spain, there is a similar sort of event or day, but it's in December, at the end of December. So first of all, it's becoming really popular now because so we've done those quizzes over like every few months. There was one around Christmas and how different countries celebrate Christmas. So what this did is first taking away, kind of elevating localization from just words and translation and showing that it's all about experience, about everyday lives, like different cultures, different behavior, different needs are so much more than just the words we translate, and how we need to think beyond the translation and
Yeah,
that experience, and making them people
exactly.
think, okay, I don't know, if we do some sort of marketing campaign around 1st of April, well, you can't really do that in all countries. Starting to
Right.
think a bit differently. And then also because it's fun, people really enjoyed it. Other things that we started doing was we call it Lockview. So every Friday in our company channel, we publish something around localization.
Nice.
Again, from real things like maybe a certain movie and how there was an aspect that was localized in different countries. Kind of things from real life, again, that elevate not just the words, but the experience.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's been so much engagement from even senior leadership, from different parts of the business. So that was one thing, to kind of really spread it in a fun way and raise that awareness. Another way has been identifying allies and people, disciplines are in the same situation like us, because oftentimes in localization we think of, we are always at the end of the process, and no one thinks about localization, no one cares about us. But the funny thing is, so many disciplines within a business would say the same thing. Like UX writers are like, no one thinks about us. Designers write the copy, or like they just put placeholders and we come last. Product marketing is like, no one involves us early on in the process. User research, the same. So when I started hearing those stories from other disciplines, on one hand, I was like, okay, not to take it personal, like we're not the only discipline.
Right.
It's just because everyone is so busy and everyone has to do a lot of things. So it's really not so much about us. And then how can we pair with some of those disciplines and in a way unite where we have similar interests? So, and one thing that we did was with UX writers. We, for example, oftentimes, especially at the beginning, we were involved in projects and they were never involved. So we would bring them in, or we would tell stakeholders, you need to speak to a writer first. Have you checked this with the writer? So we started helping them, and later they will do the same thing for us. So creating those partnerships.
Yeah.
And now, for example, we have bi-weekly catch-ups with the writers team. We team do that on a weekly basis. So we're super aligned of what's coming up next, how do we collaborate, where do we need to take consideration for localization and do some research, all of those things. So identifying those kind of partnerships that you can both benefit has been really, really crucial. The same way, I had a very close relationship with our accessibility lead. And that was really interesting because while maybe on the outside we're not that similar with localization, she was on a journey of setting up the strategy, the vision, and there was a lot that I can help based on what I've done.
Right.
She created then lots of champions of accessibility groups, so that's something that now we are thinking of doing. So really learning from others and working with others so they become your advocates as well.
Yeah.
Super, super helpful.
It's a very, very good tip. Yeah. And and there's something in the localization position in a company that sometimes can be very lonely. I mean, for you, now you have a team, but as you said, you started as, a team of two, and, I'm, my position at Blend is product marketing. So I can understand that sometimes just queue and then building those relationships is really, really important for the success of obviously your job, but also kind of the entire company, just building this relationship and make people understand what it is that you do and how you can help them. So I think it's really, really good, deep.
And even doing that at a different level. So at a level of people that are maybe your level or more junior, but different parts of the business, because we have different levels of collaboration with stakeholders. It's with individuals on a day-to-day basis, where it's project management, support, but you also need that senior level relationship and collaboration, which is more focused on the future, the opportunities, the collaboration as a long term. So tricks that I have done is every time we had new senior leaders that joined the business, we had first actually UX writing lead. I reached out to her even before she joined the company because we didn't have any UX writer at that point.
Yeah.
And kind of establish the relationship, and then being already at the business for a few years, I was there to support her, to introduce her to people, and kind of infiltrate a bit in the UX writing space by supporting. So that's another way to kind of reach out to people as they do business. If you can build those secret relationships.
No, I really do believe, personally that it all started and ends with relationships, no matter what you do. Mm-hmm. I think once you kind of establish those really good and healthy relationship in your work, then it will be, everyone will benefit from it, like both sides. So I agree. Mm-hmm. Let's speak a little bit about your other interests. So you are very passionate about helping localization managers. And if I'm not mistaken, then mostly women, right? Or is it just my agenda? But I kind of feel that, I think we talked about it in our previous conversation. So I'm interested to know kind of what you love the most about, helping people, and why do you think this industry is unique? Because there is something unique in this industry, and I'm saying that as an outsider. I'm a marketing manager, so I have no background in localization, and I kind of slowly I begin to understand there is something more unique about localization. So I'm kind of interested to hear it from your, from being the mentor in this industry. How do you find it unique?
Well, yeah, that's actually, as you mentioned in the introduction, I do a lot of things on the side as well.
Yeah.
It kind of all started during COVID. I live on my own. I don't have kids, so I had a lot of time. Like some people when in that situation. And I've been thinking for a while what it would be like to kind of maybe do consulting. Can I do this full time? All of those thoughts. So I wanted to try, and that's what I started doing. I thought of basically what are the things that I love doing, what are the things that I'm good at, and how can I monetize that? Like, how can I monetize, and how can I use that also in the space? Yeah. And even just, you mentioned the big women, there is a lot that I've kind of through my work of becoming confident and confident with myself and with my skills, because in the past, even just saying things like, this is what I'm good at, would feel so cringy, almost like it's so unacceptable to talk about what you're good at, what are your strengths. And somehow, I don't even know how, little by little, I became so just confident with my own skills and strengths, which we often almost perceive as if I think I'm good at something, it must mean that maybe you're not good at that. No, it's almost like this either or. So that
I think, and mostly for women, I have to say, I think mostly women think like that. I honestly, I don't think men think. Men will be like, yeah, I'm just good at it, and that's it. And we have all this other interpretation, and am I really good? And, imposter syndrome is much more common with women than men. Yeah. I think it's mostly women. Yeah.
So one thing that I noticed as well throughout those years that I was hiring and interviewing Skyscanner, at a point we had people 10 on my team, so I hired everyone. So it was also an amazing experience to learn, to interview. Yeah. But in doing that, I observed big opportunities where I can help was, we're a big industry and we have so many aspects. We have agencies, we have freelance individuals, we have in-house and tech. And I saw a lot of people wanting to move from the agency to the client in-house side. But there were key elements that were different in terms of mindset and skills just because of the nature of the work. And also working in tech is quite demanding in different ways, I think. I guess everyone is demanding, but in different ways. Yeah. So identifying those parts and opportunities where seeing what those individuals might be missing and me having that knowledge, I realized that this is something I can do and I can help with. So that's how I started the career mentoring. And I've had, actually just today, I had a client that accepted a role, his first role in-house in a client side. And you mentioned a bit again on the split, gender split. So I was
Yeah.
just thinking, I've had maybe 7 or 8 clients in total for the last few months, and only 2 were men. And it's true that none of those 2 had that fear a bit of themselves and their skills.
Yeah.
They're
There's
confident.
exactly. They're very confident. I've read an article by, I think it was by, VP HR or something, someone in human resource. And she said when a woman and a man reads, a job position description. So if the man fits only in 50%, he will apply. But if a woman fits in 80%, she will not apply. And I think that's kind of like, that's exactly the issue. That's the problem. That even very, highly successful and talented and, and experienced women still kind of questioning themselves. So I think it's amazing that and also another thing is that we need, and we all know it, we need someone who already done it. Me, let's say if I was, a beginner in this industry and then I see, head of localization at Skyscanner is a woman. So I know, I can do it myself. So I think that's why kind of, women like you being mentors is so important for the success of others. And again, we're including men as well, but, the 2 of us are women. So
Experience as women.
we have more experience. I only have experience as women. So yeah.
To apply for roles. One of my close friends as well as Skyscanner, she works in HR and talent, and she said something she's also observed is when she was speaking with candidates.
Yeah.
Men would talk about how this opportunity is something they want to kind of almost for them. This opportunity is a growing opportunity. They want to. They've never done this particular thing, but they want to grow. They want to learn about that. So very much about sort of expanding and stretching. While women, we talk how they already knew that they've already done this X, Y, and Z part of the description. They already have experience. So sort of a bit linked to what you're saying, almost.
Yeah.
We would go for things that we've done and we know very well, and not so much for something that's a stretch for us.
Yeah.
Which is good.
That's the way to kind of, develop as a person, as a professional as well. And I have a friend and I've learned a lot from her, and she always say, when you're applying to a new job, always take a job that is a little bit over your head, right? It's a little bit bigger than what you've done so far, because then you'll have room to grow. And I think that's crucial. And I think men by nature are more comfortable with that options than women. And I know it's what we're saying, it's very inclusive, but still, I think, in general terms, I think we do see it, we do feel it, which is why it's so,
Yeah, there's a challenge there because, as you say, go for roles that will be a stretch where you can learn and grow, but at the same time, at an interview, how do you articulate that you can do something that you haven't done? And I think, again, based on articles that I've read on the topic around men and women and sort of confidence and how we portray and present ourselves, is there is as well unconscious, subconscious bias oftentimes towards women as well at interviews. So kind of that, learning that skill and having that awareness how to talk about our potential maybe skills if we have not done, sort of that transferring those skills or seeing how we can articulate that.
100%. Yeah, it is.
And I think that's the area where working as a mentor and a coach, because actually just now I'm graduating also from a coaching course. So I'm also a coach.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's been, I think, very helpful working with those individuals and with these women in particular is being that cheerleader for them. And I think that's what we need, right? Like, I agree. Someone kind of on the outside seeing objectively what skills you have, what you've achieved. Also, me having seen so many other people, I can objectively tell you, right? Like, you are maybe better positioned than others. So being that voice and that...
I think it's also a great way to kind of take your success and, make it helpful for other women and men as well. So I think it's amazing. And again, especially in this industry, like the localization industry, also the tech industry, which is not an easy industry, especially for women, but also in general, it's not an easy, it's very high demand, high fast, industry. So I think it's so important that you have this cheerleader, as you're saying. I think it's very important, which kind of brings
even that, that's sort of like let's say it's sort of a female common trait, but then it can be so much more enhanced depending on where exactly we're from, which country and culture, because it can be more pronounced. And I saw that recently. She's from Russia.
Yeah.
And one thing that we were working on, the way that I work usually, we start with the CV and really using it as a way to articulate the best way possible all your skills and strengths, because that's the first touch point that recruiters have, right?
Right.
So I was telling her how to think of what are the things that you do well, that you do better than others, that you really enjoy doing, that stand out for you. So all of those kind of unique, what makes you unique? What is really your unique skills and strength? And she said, but I'm just normal. I don't have anything unique, I'm just a normal person with just normal skills and strengths. And she said it with this sort of this sad and acceptance of a tone. It just made me think immediately, because I think Bulgarian and Russian culture, Eastern European, is sort of similar in that sense, that it's so wrong. Like, we're taught to be even more humble.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, no.
Exactly. And sometimes it goes the other way around. And again, I'm an Israeli, and if there's something that Israeli has in spade is confidence. We're very confident as a nation, I think, because of, our history or whatever. And I think sometimes, and what you're saying about the cultural difference, it's fascinating. And we'll get to the English part in a minute, but it's fascinating because cultural, especially in the localization industry, is crucial, because even just in Blend we have people from 5 to 6 or 7 in-house from different 5 or 6, 7 different countries. It's not just countries, it's cultural, because all of us speaks English, but let's take for example Israelis and Americans. Israelis will always come out as extremely rude to Americans. It's just the truth. That's just the way it is. But are we really rude, or just the way we talk and behave and, and full of confidence versus what you said, like your Russian clients or again, Americans? I can say from experience, I lived in the US for a couple of years. And the first year, I think I had no idea what people were saying to me and if they really mean it or not because of the cultural difference. So then when it comes to, work environment, that could actually cause a lot of issues and misunderstanding. And people, again, I can only speak as an Israeli. Many times people think that we are yelling at them. We're not. We're just highly, passionate. So, raising our voices. We're not yelling. So that's interesting because when you and I talked before, so you kind of say that there's something that comes a lot with your clients and also the English part. So let's speak a little bit about that, about all of us speaking, most of us speaking all day in a language that's not our own.
But even when you say that maybe you as a culture come across as rude, it's also so much relative to where the individual you might speak with comes from.
Right, exactly.
Because, again, Eastern European, that's very big denominator. So maybe I'll just talk about Bulgaria, but we could also be rude or perceived as rude. At the same time, when I was in Israel, I told people were extremely rude. So even for me coming from a rude culture, already I really think of Israeli, like, oh my God, what are they so...
We're just very honest. We're very honest.
But at the same time, the experience I had at Skyscanner, the first few years in my role here, again, my journey here has been also so much on a personal level because I grew as a person, as an individual. I became so much more confident. But at the beginning, I was so shy. And the first few years, I had two people that were much more senior than me shared feedback with someone else from my team or my manager that I was arrogant. And for me, it was a shock because I was extremely shy. So I was like, how is it possible?
Yeah.
I would never speak in a forum like that. I would never speak in a meeting with senior people. So it was even more hurtful. And later, I found out it was just they were British. I was an Eastern European.
Exactly.
Just starting to work in a British culture, which I haven't learned.
Yeah.
And that's something that actually just last year, a few months ago, maybe last year already, I did a talk at the company level on that. I think a lot of probably people that would watch us know the Culture Map, the book from Erin Meyer, which is exactly about that, how people from different cultures communicate, collaborate, and it's all about where we're from relative to who we work with. So it's not like there's one right way, it's all about the relative thing.
Yeah.
And
comes across.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I did that was it was actually as part of we have a diversity and inclusion group within the company that focus on a lot of activities. And that was one of my thoughts in a way. Oftentimes we talk about diversity and inclusion more from different gender, different races, very rarely about culture or nationalities. And it's only a bit like as a token of we have this many nationalities working at this company, but not so much a bit what it really means. And are we open and inclusive with different people and how they express themselves, which is this point, right? Because I've been present at interviews in Skyscanner where we've had again people from a different culture that the interviewer, British, afterwards said, oh, they were very rude. And then I was thinking, well, actually they were from this and this country.
Yeah.
It could be that it's cultural. Of course, it doesn't mean that it gives you the right.
Right.
And you should be aware of how you're perceived and maybe you want to work on it. But it doesn't have to be one way. That was my message also when I did this talk was, we shouldn't expect other people to adapt to our sort of culture.
Exactly.
We should be more open to, okay, is this cultural? It's not personal then, and be mindful more from that. Yeah.
I think that's such a important point that you're raising because it's kind of like that's also part of localization. But again, all of us working in global, companies, we kind of see it all the time. And you and I talked a little bit about that. Again, the English aspect of it, where I think that that's something that a lot of native English speakers don't understand, and they cannot understand that really, of spending your entire workday speaking in another language, which can be, you and I understand that perfectly, and it can be very, very hard and can be very draining. And even if you speak fluent, I've been, speaking English most of my adult life, as I can imagine you as well. So some days it's just hard, or sometimes you just miss the content or miss the cultural reference of it. And I think that's another thing that you have to be extremely mindful. Again, saying that as someone who's a culture always interrupted as rude and loud. So it can be, and you raised that as well. It's something that you have to kind of be aware of that, especially if you're a native English speaker. So I think that's really a good point.
Exactly. That was something else that as a team and as individuals we raised again in that group, the diversity and inclusion. Another channel about that. And I came across this sort of image a while back on LinkedIn where there was this sort of a illustration of a battery and say it's 90% full. And the battery of an English speaker after a meeting is, say, 80%. But then there was this battery of a, say, Portuguese speaker after the meeting as like 50%, right?
Exactly.
That energy requires is much higher. I've also heard friends as well who asked someone to work with me on a project where they had to write a blog post. And she told me, well, I would love to, but I'm just worried about my English and maybe if someone reviews it. So there is that sort of awareness and sort of self-awareness and worry about our level of speaking English and how we're perceived in different forums. That is also about diversity and inclusion and allowing
Exactly.
for that to be openly discussed. And when we talked about those things, when myself or my team raised those kind of different aspects on this international space, it also as well elevates again localization. Again,
Exactly.
So much more complex.
Yeah.
And then we would get random people reach out to us. Oh, I'm writing this. Can you have a look if it's, it's a company-wide communication? Can you have a look if it's...
Exactly.
So all of those different aspects become so much more richer.
And it's such an interesting, I feel like it's such an interesting subject because I think a lot of time, even now as you speak, I understand some things and I'm working in this industry for the last 7 years, speaking mostly in English most of the day. And I think it's so important, again, to be mindful for that and then maybe find the right, procedures to kind of help the employees that are, not a native English speakers. Because I know for me, for example, I try to set meetings where I know I have to speak in English earlier in the day versus, 5 p.m., 6 p.m. where my mind is just tired and I feel like, I will not be as coherent as I can when it's 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. So even stuff like that, once it's kind of like the awareness of leadership and management could be set as guidelines, and that could be super helpful for a lot of the employees. So you're raising some really good points here.
Or even as well having, again, leadership. Again, we talk about diversity at the leadership level to set examples and to be inclusive. But now we actually, a lot of our C-level, they are people that are non-British and non-American, so we have more than we had in the past. But sometimes in the past, I remember being either watching, listening to them, or in kind of group with senior leaders. And I felt that exactly, like there was no one that was non-native English speaker.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I felt so intimidated expressing myself. But
exactly.
Yeah. But now we have our CEO is actually, he's Dutch. And while his English is perfect, a lot of times in town halls or in communication, he would comment, he would say, maybe I'm not saying this right because English is not my native language. No,
exactly.
He said that several times, and even that on its own gives people a bit that,
right.
Okay, our CEO is not native.
I'm fine.
Yeah. So
I totally... I think it's so important, and also being kind of being more, now I forgot the word in English, just be a little bit more I'll say gentle, it's not the right word, with yourself about making mistakes when you communicate in English. And I had a conversation with someone here in this company, and I said some days, I'm busy, I'm not feeling good, whatever reason is, and I feel like my English isn't as good as always, then I joke about it. I will start a conversation and say, I'm so sorry, my English is not really good today. And then everyone will laugh. And then I will immediately feel better. And then, it's going to affect the way I speak. So I think just again, as you say, just being aware that this is something that we have a lot of people in the company who are not, or speaking most of the day, not in their native language, and then how that connects to localization. We have a lot of conversation about that in the community forum that we have with our translators here at Blend, because again, we have a community of, people from all around the world. Most of them communicate in another language most of the day. So I think it's some really great tips and points, and over our time, but it is so interesting. So
and I think that's why localization is so amazing, because there's so many aspects to it.
Yeah.
Right? There's the translation, the words, the experience, the visuals, the product, but then just interaction, collaboration, speaking. It's so broad. So many different ways to look at it.
Exactly, and it's in ways that we sometimes don't even realize, and we always have it in Israel, and only now when I'm in this industry I understand this localization, because we have an issue in Israel where the titles of the movie are being, translated from English to Hebrew always in an awful way, in an awful, very uncultural way, which kind of... I just read an article about that actually caused the Israeli audience to miss a lot of really good movies because the translation of the title was so bad. That's localization done bad. So
there's plenty of examples for that.
I wish, most of the people who listen to this podcast are not speaking Hebrew, so obviously you're not as well. But yeah, we have tons of examples for that. Even just now in a recent movie that I watched I was like, what is the name of that in Hebrew? I'm not going to watch. And then my friend said, let's go watch. And it's really one of the most successful movies of, this time. So yeah. So before we wrap up, is there anything else, any point that kind of important for you to raise?
Not really. I think it was funny and actually positive thing that only at the very last minute we talked about bad localization because oftentimes that's what, we are known because there is something wrong with the localization, with translation, with experience.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, but we managed to find so many topics to talk about all the positive aspects.
I know. I also love that we talked about aspects that we usually don't we're not paying enough attention. And again, even just me working, in this industry, now while you were talking, I a lot of things kind of clicked to me. Even in the really small things that you can make, just be, as you said, just be aware, just be mindful, to even the English thing, to even set up meetings in earlier days so your, non-native English speakers are not tired and more comfortable, or be less judgmental when someone making a mistakes. I think that's a crucial thing, actually, the mistake issues. I know a lot of, again, if we talked about women, I see, a lot of women are very afraid. I've met a lot of women saying, my English is bad. And most of people's English is not bad, especially in Israel, where you kind of study English. You finish 12 years of school and you know how to speak English. Maybe not super well, but you will be able to, have a conversation. A lot of women say, my English is so bad, I make so many mistakes. But it's just confident thing. Start talking, then you get better, you do less mistakes. So I think just, as you said, just being mindful that localization is also part of company's culture is so, so important. So thank you so much for this really lovely chat and for raising awareness for a lot of interesting topics that we don't usually think about.
Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for the next episode by following us on social media. If you're in the localization business, join our private Facebook group, Pro Localization Club. See you there.
Thanks for tuning in to the Blend podcast. Follow Blend on social for updates and future episodes. We'll see you next time.